Where did this really cool video go? Oh, there we go. Okay.
Since the beginning of time, God's presence has been made known. At creation, he hovered over the entire earth. As the children of Israel wandered the desert, his presence was a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. To Elijah, God's presence was not in the wind or earthquake or fire, but in a gentle whisper. When Jesus was born, God's presence was experienced in his only Son, the light of the world. And when Jesus established his church, his presence appeared as tongues of fire. Today, God's presence can still be experienced in extraordinary ways in our everyday lives. But how will you respond? Will he go unnoticed, or will you embrace him and worship?
Now that was worth waiting for, wasn't it? How you guys doing this morning? Right on, right on. It's kind of a bizarro world. So we've got Steve leading worship, and now the worship guy is teaching. Everything has been flipped up. It should be fun. So and I'm looking forward to it. We had a good time last night. It's kind of cool to see Steve leading worship, isn't it? I like it. It does my heart. That is the heart of our leadership team, is in worship, and it encourages me. If I was to hand you a piece of paper and a pen and say, I want you to write whatever comes to your mind when you think of the word worship, what would you put? What would you write down? Would you say, well, worship is what happens up here. It's all the singing and music. It's the band. It's the thing that Christians do. Would you say it happens on a Sunday or a Saturday? I mean, what comes to your mind when I say the word worship? We want to, as you saw in the video, God's presence shows up throughout history. And as he came and met with his people, people responded in worship. But what is this thing we call worship? We do it weekly. We do it daily. What is it? I want you to walk away this morning with really just two things, and that is this. My main premises are this. Worship is an activity of the human soul. It's not a thing that just Christians do. It's what people do. And the second thing I want you to know is gratitude is the starting point for cultivating a heart of worship. If you think about it, we as humans are really wired to worship. I mean, it's just how we're put together. If I was to sit down and have a conversation with any one of you, it wouldn't be very long where I was able to find what you're passionate about, the things that kind of light you. And as I follow that thread, I would really be able to see what you value and ultimately what you worship. It just is what humans do. Say with me, I am a worshiper.
I am a worshiper.
You sound like you need a little convincing. I am a worshiper.
I am a worshiper.
And I am great at it. You know what? It's really true. Worship happens in all of our lives. It is how we are wired, and we're frequently doing it. It happens in homes. It happens in malls. It happens in sports arenas, in our businesses. Kids do it when they worship their sports heroes. Adults do it as they worship the American dream. People who are retired do it. Every ethnicity worships. Rich people, poor people. We all worship, and we're great at doing it. Worship looks like whatever you put your heart into, whatever you joy, as you experience that, you talk about it, and that talking about it is your worship. I love to mountain bike. I love to go for cycling rides. And when we finish those, we're usually high-five. Oh, did you see that guy go off that jump? And we're celebrating those moments. Why? That just is in us to do that. We are worshipers, and we are great at doing it. I have to confess to you, my wife and I laid down our $21 a couple weeks ago, and we went to go see the new Michael Jackson film. So, anybody go see the movie? Yes, we are our own little cult. I know, you're ashamed to admit it. Yes, I saw the movie. It was actually fun for me as an artist just to see, the different, the way that he goes at his artistry in his final concert. But it reminded me of something I saw a number of years ago. And I want to show you this clip. And I want you to look at this clip more through the lens of worship and how we as humans worship. So just watch the clip, and it's kind of got some funky audio, so you got to put up with it. It's a little old, but I want you to see it and look at it through the lens of worship. Roll the clip.
What used to just be...
I don't know what it's like for you to see that. When I look at that, I want to do a moonwalk, first of all. But aside from that, when I look at that, I get two responses. I'm encouraged in one sense, and I'm discouraged in another sense. In one sense, I look at that and I go, those people get worship. They get what it's like to see something and value and to respond to that. And it encourages me in a sense that I think our generation could get what it means to worship, especially if we put God as the object of our worship. We could do that. You don't see anybody looking down the road going, that guy's wacko, he's raising his hand, what's up with that? They are just so caught up in the experience, they're not paying attention to anybody else. They got it in Stockholm, they get it in Ireland. Why? Because it's what we as humans do. We worship. And I think that encourages me. It discourages me in another sense, though. When I think about their worship, I think, great worship, demonstrative, public worship, really expressive, fully giving themselves to it. Big worship. Little bitty God. You know what I'm saying? I mean, and it discourages me because it reminds me how much we as humans can throw ourselves so much into something that would, number one, not love us back. He may be the king of pop. He is not the king of the universe. But we respond to stuff like that all the time. I was reading a book by C.S. Lewis not too long ago on the reflection of the Psalms. And C.S. Lewis is looking at the different psalm writers. If you ever spent much time in the psalmists talk all the time about worshiping God and delighting themselves and enjoying God. And C.S. Lewis, in writing this Reflections, notes that, and he says, I was a little confused by it, why people would get so worked up about God. And then I want you to read what he says. He says, the psalmists, in telling everyone to praise God, are doing what all men do when they speak of what they care about. My whole difficulty about the worship of God depended on my absurdly denying to us what we delight to do, what we can't help doing about everything else we value. He was reading the Psalms and seeing that expression. He's like, I don't understand why they're getting all worked up about it. Then he realizes, wait a minute, that's just what humans do. When they value something, they express it like that. And he concludes his thought with this. I think we delight to praise what we enjoy, because praise not merely expresses, but completes the enjoyment. It's appointed consummation. As you go and enjoy the activities of your life, and as a Christ follower, as you enjoy God, he shows up in your life. Maybe doing miraculous things, or maybe just giving you a sense of peace as you face Monday morning, a sense of hope as you look to the future. And as you experience that, you then turn it out into what? Into worship. I want to offer you just a simple definition. This is something I just kind of thought over, and it's nothing really profound, but I think it kind of sums up what we're talking about here. It says, worship is our expression of delight and enjoyment for who God is and what he has done. Read that together with me, would you? Worship is our expression of delight and enjoyment for who God is and what he's done. As we experience God, as we see him work in our life, a consummation of that moment is celebrating and thanking God for what he's done. The psalmist in Psalms 134 says it like this, may my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth if I do not remember you, if I do not consider Jerusalem my highest joy. He says, my body wouldn't even function normally if I held back praise for what I really enjoy, which is the King of the universe. A few months ago, I had the opportunity to climb Half Dome. Have you guys ever climbed Half Dome before? Anybody in here? Yeah, it's a great experience. It was really, really a lot of fun. I went with another worship leader friend of mine, and this is Peter Ellis. And we started off, it's up in Yosemite, and you start at 4,000 feet and you climb to 8,000. So it's a good, hardy hike, and you start at a pretty good elevation and you end at a good elevation. We started off the day fully intending to get a big stack of pancakes and, really fueling up for the day. We were in such a hurry to get to the trail that we ended up just having a banana and a couple nuts. Wasn't wise. And we made our trek up. It took us about 4 hours to get to the top. And when we got to the top, it just is this beautiful view up there. And big geek. I know you can't help it. Like I'm on top of the world. So we got up there, and Peter and I had a little bit of a miscommunication on what we were going to bring for food. I thought we were each bringing our own. He thought I was bringing it for everybody. So we pounded down what little I had, and which ended up being about a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And we started working our way back down. We ran out of water. And they asked you to bring like 4 quarts, and we brought half that. But we brought a pump thinking we could pump water out, but the pump broke. So it's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we're on this great adventure, but we're starting to bonk, where your body gets kind of worn out. You need fuel, you need water. And I'm just praying, God, this is beautiful, but please get me off this trail. I don't want to fall down dead here. I was tired. We get to the bottom, and we make it. And we're celebrating. We're just talking about the event. We pound down some waters, and we get to the restaurant for the first real meal of the day. And I'm telling you, I had a big old cheeseburger with bacon in it. It was great. I had a full order of fries, a full order of onion rings, all the Cokes, and we're just taking this whole thing in, and we're just celebrating this moment. And I noticed how quickly we are to say, thank God that we have the bodies and the ability to do that. You see, worship is just normal for us to do. It's because we're wired that way. And really the starting point is gratitude. As we take in what God gives us, it goes back out in gratitude. I want you to see something, because Jesus talked and addressed in a very subtle, Jesus-like way the whole area of gratitude. If you have your Bibles, would you turn with me to Luke 17? Luke is basically, go to the middle of the Bible, start going to the right, and you'll hit Matthew, Mark, Luke. Jesus is on a trail with some of his followers, and they're heading to Jerusalem, and let's pick up the story in verse 11. It says this: Now on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he was going into the village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance, and they called out in a loud voice, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." So you have the picture of Christ with his followers. They're on a trail. They're heading out to Jerusalem. They go through Samaria and Galilee, and they come upon this little town. And as they enter the town, these lepers come to them. Now, I don't know if you know anything about leprosy, but it's a brutal disease. And these guys have to leave their families. They have to live outside the city limits. And as they come to people, they have to pronounce unclean. They're required to let everybody know not to get close to them. I took a few minutes, and I looked up in Wikipedia what it means, what leprosy is. By the way, Wikipedia, according to Michael Scott of The Office, is the best source of information, because everywhere from anywhere, anybody could write anything they want about it, so you know you're getting the best information possible. Yeah. Anyway, here's what it says. Wikipedia: Hansen's disease, another word for leprosy, is a chronic disease caused by a bacteria. Leprosy is primarily a disease of the peripheral nerves, mucosa of the upper respiratory tract. Skin lesions are the primary external sign. Left untreated, leprosy can be progressive, causing permanent damage to the skin, nerves, limbs, and eyes. Leprosy does not directly cause body parts to fall off on their own accord. Instead, they become disfigured or auto-amputated as a result of the disease symptoms. That does not sound good. You can imagine how hard it is. Basically, what you do is you lose a sense of feel and touch. You can hug somebody. Well, you can't hug them, because in their culture, you couldn't touch them. So you had to have this removal from touching anybody. But you also, if you, say for instance, you were to pick up a really hot pot, you and I would pick it up, and immediately we'd drop it down, we'd look at our hand, it would be red, we'd stick it underneath water. If you had leprosy, you would pick it up, not knowing at all that it was burning you or it was hot. You'd carry it around, you'd set it down, and then you'd look at your hand and see all the blisters, and you could see how terrible that would be and what it would do to your body. If you had a shoe, you might put it on that was too tight. You and I would walk a few feet, and we're like, oh, wow, we shouldn't wear this. They could walk for days like that. Take it off and see all the blisters and the ulcers that are there. My son came to me the other day. He's been lifting, and he's all like, Dad, I got all these scars on my body. Look at them. I don't even know how I got them. I'm like, that might not be a good thing. You might be careful about that. And if you think about it, if you had that disease, you could do that all the time, and that's what the auto amputation would be. It's like things would just fall off, and how awful that would be. Those folks had to leave their family. They couldn't touch another person. They couldn't go to the grocery store or the synagogue. And because of that, these 10 lepers see Jesus, and you can imagine their minds, the hope. This guy could heal us. So they cry out to him, Master, have mercy on us. The story goes on. It says, when he saw them, verse 14, he said, go show yourself to the priests. And as they went, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back, praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet, and he thanked him. And he was a Samaritan. You hear the music go, yum, bum, bum. Samaritans in Jesus' time were not looked at. They were seen as the spiritual outsiders. And Jesus notes, this is one of the outsiders coming back to say thanks. Jesus asked, were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner? Then he said to him, rise and go. Your faith has made you well. 10 lepers come. They get healed. And as they go back by faith, Jesus says, you're healed. And so they go back to the priest so the priest could proclaim them clean. And as they're running back there, you can imagine them going, oh my goodness, I can feel my hands again. This is amazing. You know, they're high-fiving each other. And they get to the priest, and sure enough, he says, you're clean. Now, only one of them comes back. And as I read that, the text doesn't give us, 3-point outline of this. Jesus doesn't rebuke anybody. He just lets the thing go. But he does note only one of them came back. And as I read that, I don't know what it does for you, but for me, I'm like, I see some of myself in that. What is it about us that is so willing to take something, maybe something that God has given us, and just almost ignore the opportunity to come back to God and thank him? Gratitude is so essential for cultivating a worshiper's heart. And as you think about it, I was processing it, and I thought, well, maybe they thought they'll do it later. Have you ever done that? You get a Christmas gift, and you're really busy, but you think, oh, I need to say thank you, and you maybe write a thank you back. But you get so caught up in the event that days, weeks go by. Now it's like March, and you're like, I never said anything about it. It's too late. Maybe that happened to them. Maybe they wanted to get so back to their families, see their kids, pick up a golf club again, or, I don't know. Maybe they just wanted to get back into life, and they thought, Jesus is going to be in town for a while. I'll come back to him. But they never did. So many times for me, I'm having a great steak, and as it's going down my throat, I'm immediately thinking of what? Dessert. I can't wait to get to the next thing, And I think maybe that's what they were like. It's like, you know what, this is great, but I got to go to the next. I want to see my family again. And they just cruise right on without going back and thanking Jesus. Maybe it bugged them that they had to ask for help, and they weren't healed by their own efforts. I can identify with that. Any pickup truck owners in here? You guys got pickup trucks? Steve, you're really the only proud one. But I'm with you. It's like I don't know how I ever got along without a truck. It's an amazing. I carry stuff all the time. I'll throw stuff into the back. Inevitably, my neighbor, I'll be putting something in there, and he's like, "Do you need help with that?" And I'm like, "Oh no, I got it." Really? Because it looks like you need help with it. It's like there's something inside of us that doesn't want to admit that we need some assistance sometimes. And I don't know, maybe the lepers felt like, you know what, I hated to admit that I couldn't homeopathically just do this on my own, that they really needed a miraculous sign and somehow for Jesus to step in. And so what do? They just go on their merry way. Or maybe it's deeper than that. And this is what I want to present to you. Maybe at the core, they believed they really deserved to have a healthy life free from leprosy. And so oh, you know what? If you want to go back, one of the ushers can grab you, and you can chat with them for a few minutes, and then homeopathic. It's thank you. It's just to be able to, on their own with natural medicines, be able to cure themselves. So, yeah. So maybe they thought, we just deserve this. And if you think about it, our culture bombards us with messages all the time of what we deserve. You deserve a car with 37 airbags. You deserve a weed eater. You deserve that Happy Meal at McDonald's. You deserve. Why? Because you're entitled to it. And so for us, we carry with us all the time the sense of, I'm entitled to this. And when I don't get it, I'm discontent. And if you think about it, what is the core of sin for you and I? The core for sin is discontentment. Adam came to Eve at the garden, or the serpent came to Eve at the garden and said, you could be like God. You should be discontent with what you have. And so he tempted her. What's lying? Lying is a discontentment with the truth. Lust It's a discontentment with what you have sexually. Proverbs 5 says, may you be content with your wife of your youth. May her breast satisfy you always. And so for so many of us, we aren't satisfied with something. And so discontentment is at the core of sin. Does anybody know, there was a few months ago, ABC did a special on the happiest place on earth. Anybody know what the happiest place on earth is? No, it's not Disneyland. Hate to burst your bubble. It is not Disneyland. No, they said the happiest place on earth was not the United States, with all of its superpower and prosperity. It's not the States. Matter of fact, the States was like around 23. It wasn't like Fiji or the Bahamas, some tropical place. It wasn't Italy or France, some place known for its culture and cuisine. It was Denmark. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know much about Denmark. I do know that they have very high taxes, and it's a very dreary kind of culture, lots of rain and cold weather. But one of the things the Danes do have, and this is what the report talked about, one of the things that they do have is this great sense that a garbage collector is no different or no better than a banker, that they're all kind of on an equal playing field. And one of the things that the report brought out was the Danes have a very low expectation. And because of that, most part, they're pretty happy. When something shows up, they're content with it. And because of that, it produced this country having a general attitude of happiness. And if you think about our culture, it's kind of just the opposite. We feel so much like we deserve these. I mean, we deserve all the traffic lights to be green. We deserve, when we pull into a parking lot, our spot should be there, right? We deserve to have a girlfriend that looks like a supermodel, a husband who makes a six-figure salary. We have this sense of all these things that we deserve. And maybe the lepers felt in some way, you know what, this is something I deserve. I'm not a bad person. And I think in some ways that's what the Bible speaks to us. It goes deeper than just what we deserve, because for many of us, we feel at the core, we're good people. And good people deserve good things, don't they? But the Bible speaks in a different way sometimes to us and lets us know our true spiritual condition. And our true spiritual condition is being separate from God. Our righteous deeds are filthy rags to God. We don't measure up to his perfection, is what the Bible says. I was reading a book a few months ago with some of our worship leaders, a book by J.I. Packer, and he wrote this, and I want you to read it and think along those lines. It says, the thought of themselves as creatures fallen from God's image, rebels against God's rule, guilty and unclean in God's sight, fit only for God's condemnation, never enters their heads. For most of us, we just cruise on with life and not realize that our lives are in rebellion to God if we do not submit them to him. Somehow we think we deserve these things. And conversely, we think we don't deserve suffering. We don't. And maybe I can see if the lepers felt the same way. You know what? I'm a great person. I don't deserve to suffer. You think about suffering, and for many of us, we look at it through this lens of, we don't deserve to have these hard things go on in our life. And when we get them, we think we have nothing to be thankful for. Recently, I've been doing some thinking about suffering and what it means. And I used to think of suffering as you're either in the valley or you're on the mountaintop. If you're in the valley, you're going through the hard times. But eventually you'll get to the mountaintop where the times will be good. And I've been thinking if that's not the right metaphor, if maybe a better metaphor would be, it's like railroad tracks. And there's always two tracks running throughout our life. There's a track that are the hard, challenging things. And there's the track that are the good things, that are the blessings. There's always something to be thankful and grateful for. And there's always something that is a challenge that we need to go to God with. I think probably one of the best times I can remember in my life where that was the case was when I was in college. My dad called me. It was my third year, and he called me and said, Mark, we found out your mom has cancer, and she has breast cancer. And I said, well, do I need to come home? What do I need to do? He goes, no, I want you to stay at school. Your sister actually is going to leave. She was a scholarship basketball player down in Southern California at her college, and so she left that, and she went to care for my mom. And it began this process of really challenging our family. I don't know if any of you have experienced cancer in your life, but it just becomes this thing that you fight. And as my mom began that fight, it began my parents fighting. And I remember as a kid thinking, my parents loved God. They were devout Christ followers. I remember thinking, they would never get divorced. It just would never happen. But I watched them go through this battle with cancer. And I watched them begin to turn and fight. And it just made their relationship, it put a magnifying glass on every imperfection in their relationship. And after a year or two battling, my mom had a double mastectomy, and then she had cancer in her bones, and so she had to go through radiation. And this battle went on, and my folks ended up separating. But the good track that I remember seeing, as hard as that was, the good rail that I remember watching as I watched my mom, she became much more of a generous person. And interestingly enough, she used to go weekly to her pastor. She went over to South Hills Church, and Peter Wilkes was the pastor there. And she would go there every week and meet with him, and they would talk about heaven, what it's like. And she began building this hope for heaven, the life after. And I watched that fruit. I'd sit down with her, and she would just teach me about what heaven was going to be like. And I remember thinking, what a beautiful fruit that is. That's something I don't think about a lot. I watched my dad. He became, since he was single at that point, he had a whole singles ministry that he set up at his church. And God was using him to reach out to different people in amazing ways. And this battle with cancer went up and down, but I watched the two of them just beautifully continue to bear fruit. And interesting enough, I remember getting a call when actually it was really close to Christmas, my dad saying, your mom and I are going to get back together. I go, what happened? He goes, well, I was at my church, and your mom was at her church, and we both just had this sense from God that we were the problem. Wow, God is profound, is he not? They both sensed that they were, the core of the issue, so they came back to each other, reconciled, and in 5 months later, God took my mom home. And I remember this great celebration of my mom and her life and all that she brought to us. And I remember, as I look back at it now, they were really two tracks running at all times. And I want to think for you, what's going on in your life? Maybe the financial crisis, you're looking at the holidays, and you're looking at it being very challenging. We as a staff have talked a little bit about how we as a church can help. But maybe you're facing some of those kind of things. I would call you and invite you to be like that one leper who comes back and gives thanksgiving to God. Because I believe no matter where you are, there are those two tracks. There's the track that's challenging, and there's the track that is the blessing of God that you can return and give thanksgiving to God. I want to send you home with a simple homework assignment. Can I do that? We don't give a lot of homework here, but I want to give you a homework of two things. First of all, if you notice your worship folders, I left a lot of it blank. Actually, I didn't write any notes. Completely blank. What I want you to do is take that home and put it on your nightstand. Just put a pen there. And every day, when you lay in bed at night, before you go to sleep, would you write down 5 things you're thankful for? We need to develop and cultivate a discipline of being grateful to God. If we don't, we're just going to be like a lot of these guys. We're just going to think we deserve it, think we're entitled to, and we will cruise on, never returning back to God and giving him our thanksgiving. I want to call you to do that. Every night, you're going to be rolling into the Thanksgiving season here with your family. Every night this next week, take a few seconds and just don't write the same thing every day. Choose 5 different things. It won't be that hard. But things that you're thankful to God for. And the second thing I want to ask you to do, when I was studying a little bit of this, the Jewish people were required to have a festival called the Festival of Weeks. And in that festival, it was a time of giving thanksgiving to God for his blessing. And they would give their thanksgiving offering, their votive offering, their free will offerings. And along with that, the requirement was this. They were not to harvest their field around the peripheral, around the edges. They were to leave that for who? For the poor and for the stranger. That was in their festival to do that so that those people were cared for. And I would tell you this, you guys, you blow me away with your ability to serve. I feel so proud of our church for doing that. And I want to, it's not something we do once a year. It's a lifestyle that we're trying to cultivate. So I would encourage you as you roll into to this season, what can you do to provide for the poor or the stranger? Recently, I've been carrying a little homeless kit in my car. It's a few bottles of water, and it's a few power bars. A friend of mine carries with him at all times McDonald's gift cards. And when he comes to the Meridians, he'll just hand one to one of those, somebody there who might need something. Something else I would call you to do if you could help us with this. I'm kind of going out a little bit of a limb. We talked a little bit about staff, but maybe there's somebody here and you don't have anywhere to go for Thanksgiving. Come on, we could do something about that, can't we? I want to invite you, if you're a person and you have a home, you want to have some people over, maybe some of your kids are gone, it's going to be a little quieter this year for Thanksgiving, would you take your communication card when the offering comes by in about 10 minutes? Would you take the communication card and write your name very legibly, because some of our staff are gone, so I'm going to have to do this Monday morning. I want to be able to read it. Write very legibly your name and your phone number, and just say, hey, I would love to have 2 or 3 people come over. If you're here, maybe you've just gone through a divorce, maybe this Thanksgiving is going to be a lonely time for you for whatever reason, would you put your name on a card, and Monday morning I'll connect the dots and see if we can't just care for each other in a real simple way. Again, I said it earlier, I'm really proud of this church. I'm really proud to be one of your pastors, to watch you serve. We had some of the highest numbers serve last weekend. And it reminds me, as I look at these core values, loving God, loving others, loving our neighbors, you excel and you lead us and our valley in serving. It's just quite frankly, you do. But I have to tell you this, as one of your pastors, I have a sense that a growth area for us is worship and gratitude. We can do better at that. We can be more like the one leper who receives blessings from God, and he comes back and he gives thanksgiving. Would you pray with me? Father, we're grateful for a season that our culture provides us, this Thanksgiving time. It forces us to get together with family and friends, but also to have a few moments of reflection. And we just confess to you, God, I know I personally do, that so much of my heart is in a rush. There are many times I think I deserve some of the blessings of God. And when they come, I receive them and I cruise right on through to the next thing. And we admit, Father, that maybe part of our culture tells us what we're entitled to, what we deserve. And I pray that you would help us to slow down. You would help us to go counterintuitive to that flow. And Father, that you would produce in us the ability to return back to you with gratitude. There's always something challenging in our life, but there's always another track. And that's something that we can be grateful for. Lord, as we take a few minutes and as we reflect on the death and burial and resurrection of Jesus, we take these elements of communion together. God, I would pray that you would slow us down enough to take inventory of the blessings of God and how you've seen our spiritual condition and how you met us through Jesus Christ and provided us that salvation. Lead us now as we worship you. In Jesus' name.